Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. Why? Because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that just got passed through the House. It is now into the Senate, and this has major implications, some in a very positive way for us as real estate investors. And because it's happening in real time, I wanted to do a breakdown of what's in this bill and how it can benefit investors. But Michael had an emergency today. His Tesla died. He's like, dude, I woke up, I went to get my car, nothing would work. It wouldn't even turn on. I was like, is there a battery? He's like, yes, it just stopped working. For some of you guys that don't like Elon, you're going to hear that and go, psh, that car's trash. You know me, I'm a Tesla fan. So I decided I'm doing this solo. Now, this is what I need from you guys. If you like this flow, you like how it is just me giving it to you straight and raw, let me know. If you guys like this, I'm cutting Michael out. He's out of this podcast. This is just Mikey only instead of the Mikeys. I'm just joking. But I do want to know if you guys like this flow or if you guys prefer how we typically do it, which is more conversational based. This is going to be a lot of information coming your way though. So first, we normally do the overvalued, undervalued. I'm giving it to myself. I'm going to do this for you. Number one, 100% bonus depreciation. Yes, more of that. This is a huge one for investors. 2, buying real estate just for the tax loss. I think that's a sucker's game. A lot of people buy real estate so they don't have to pay taxes. I don't think you should make investment decisions based on taxes. Make the investment decision based on return. If you get tax help, great. This new House bill, I don't know yet. You're going to hear a lot of the pros and cons. I'm going to say it's needed. If this thing doesn't pass, the market's going to frickin' tank. The SALT cap increase to $40K. That is going to help me personally. I'm kind of leaning towards that being a bad thing, though. We'll break that down in this podcast. First year write-offs on property upgrades. Yes, please. Using bonus depreciation to offset W-2 income. Yes. Heck yeah. Expensing manufacturing buildings. Yeah, let's do that. Real estate investing in 2025, depending on your asset class and location. Yeah, do that. It's undervalued, but be careful. There are areas that it's saturated and you're paying too much. Idaho, I just had a friend build a house. I talk about Idaho all the time. The market is correcting. Now they're like trying to hold this thing to get the value back up. We'll see if that continues. All right, first off, what is depreciation? Now, if you're a real estate investor, you know what this is. I posted something on X talking about depreciation and that 100% is potentially coming back. And I had somebody say, you're a scumbag for that. Like, why are you going to just let an apartment become vacant so that you can capture tax help? That's not what depreciation is. So when you buy an apartment, parts of that apartment wear out. There's wear and tear. And as real estate investors, you're able to capture that depreciation over time. So for multifamily residential, your depreciation schedule is 27 and a half years. So let's say you buy an apartment building for $10 million. You cannot depreciate land, so you have to take the land value out. Let's say for this example, $3 million land value, which gives you $7 million of asset that you can depreciate over 27 and a half years. Math is simple. You divide 7 million by 27 and a half, which gives you about $254,000 each year to depreciate. This is why it's beneficial, because you are now showing a loss on paper, even though that loss isn't coming out of your pocket. And here's where it starts getting cool. If your cash flow from that property, let's say, is less than $254,000, well, does that show that you're making a gain or that you have taxable income? No. So if you're making $200,000 a year in cash flow and your depreciation loss is $254,000, you're not paying taxes on that. Or maybe the best way to say it from a compliance standpoint is you're pushing those taxes into a later date that you can have a strategy to ultimately avoid. So it's beneficial to do that. Now, in the TCJA, which is the tax cuts that came in 2017, 100% bonus depreciation came back into play. And what that means is in real estate, there's some items of your building that depreciate faster than 27 and a half years. Basically, there's some items that depreciate in 5, some in 7, some in 15. And what you're able to do as a real estate investor is do something called a cost segregation study. Basically, what that means, you hire a CPA, they go look at your building, and they find all the things that you can depreciate on a tighter window. And then when you're looking at your depreciation schedule, you're going to get a whole bunch up front, and then it'll continue out in a smaller scale or smaller number for the full 27 and a half years. So in a lot of cases, we have projects where we can get 100% of our principal investment in depreciation loss over, let's say, a 7-year window. But what 100% bonus depreciation lets you do is capture a chunk of that and take it all year one. So if we start going into what this means for 100% bonus depreciation, if it stays in this bill and passes the Senate, if we put a building into use for 2025, considering that this thing passes, because the building has to be in use, let's say the building is worth $36 million and the land value is 7. That would give us $29 million to depreciate. Now we do a cost segregation study, and let's say that gives us $6.75 million of assets to depreciate in 5 years. This is your fixtures, your equipment, etc. And let's say we get $2.5 million that we can depreciate in 15. That full $9.25 million could qualify for bonus depreciation. Well, that means that we get to capture the entire 9.25 in 2025. So that's huge. Now, as of right now, if 100% bonus depreciation doesn't come back, we can only capture 40% of the depreciation loss year one. So this is a significant additional amount of money. It's about $3.7 million immediately, and then about 5.2 of that is total for year one. And then if we're looking at like how that actually is applied, if you're at a 25% tax rate, that's about $2.24 million in tax reduction versus $1 million in tax reduction if we're only capturing that 40%. So it's massive. Now, why do real estate investors like that coming back? I think it's obvious. If you can make investments strategically and capture a lot of that depreciation up front, now you're doing two things at once. You're getting money to work, so you're making an investment based on the return, and you can start playing the game that you're able to capture a lot of loss up front to help you offset additional gains that you may have. So you start playing the tax game plus the return game. Some of the pushback on that. Anytime we talk about tax incentive, I think there's probably a few things at play. One, most people feel like tax incentive is only for the wealthy, so it's not fair for everyone else. And there's a third part of it that is actually true. The tax code incentivizes the business owner. It does not incentivize W-2 income. And because most people are employees, depreciation doesn't offset the actual income that you're taxed on yearly. So you don't feel like there's as much benefit versus if you're a real estate investor. Because if you're a real estate investor or a real estate professional, you're able to actually use depreciation loss to offset your ordinary income. Yes, that's an incentive given to real estate investors that W-2 doesn't get. Now, how I've always, let's say, squared that, or why I think this is actually a good thing to promote, is because the tax code is all about incentives to influence investor behavior. The powers that be have learned that if they create incentive, investors act. And because the government doesn't build real estate, and because real estate is needed in our society and is a function of economic growth, this is one of the incentives that they have used to get more people to invest in real estate. Now, so what does that mean for people who are W-2 that want to make real estate investments? You still get incentive. You just get it in a different way. You get passive incentive. It feels like we're not taught this in school, that incentives are not only legal, it's kind of the whole point of the tax code. So a lot of times when I'm telling people about tax incentives, the first thought is you're doing something wrong, it's sketchy, it's almost like under the table money. That's not what tax incentive is. Think of it as simply as this. tax incentive is created to incentivize investor behavior to put dollars into areas that stimulate the economy. So I don't think it's something you need to feel bad about. I think it's how the system was created to grow GDP. And if it's out there, take advantage of it. Now, one thing that's also coming into play with One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I can't believe that's the name of it, but that's what they're going with, is estate tax relief. So let's now go on like legacy planning. This doesn't apply to everybody, but it does apply to certain people. The bill would permanently increase the estate and gift tax exemption to $15 million per person, which is about double the current projected level, starting in 26. Now, the TCJA that was passed in 17 doubled the exemption to $12 million per person, but it was set to revert to $5 million in 2026. So this bill would keep it very high, and if you're married, it would actually double. You could get about $30 million of tax exemption. So why is this important? Well, if you're wealthier and you pass your portfolio down to your kids, well, they get a big chunk of that before they're taxed. My perspective on this one, gosh, some of these things I could find myself arguing both sides. Does this benefit the wealthy? Yes. Are kids inheriting a portfolio that they didn't build and aren't paying taxes on it? Yeah, it is. But on the other end, our money is taxed so much, like at what end does it stop? Right? Like think about all the ways that we're taxed. We're taxed, at the corporate level. We're taxed personally. We're taxed when we buy stuff. We're taxed, $1 is taxed like 7 different times. So in some regard, if you have somebody that has already paid taxes over and over and over, I'm not sure you should pay again when you die. But I'll leave this one open for debate because I can kind of see both sides of the coin here. One of the next kind of big components, and this one is creating a lot of controversy, is the SALT cap. And what SALT stands for, it's the state and local tax deduction. And what it does, it allows taxpayers to deduct certain state and local taxes, which is property, income, and sales, from their federal tax bill. So in 2018, there was no limit on the deductions. Post-17, in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a $10,000 cap was introduced. Now, for me personally, this one hurt me. I live in California. I'm taxed very heavy here. And so I definitely now have a, let's call it double tax at play. What the big, beautiful bill, as of right now, Senate may pull this out, it's going to possibly raise the cap up to about $30,000, or it might eliminate it entirely for certain income brackets. Now, here's kind of your pushback, and it's interesting because you're getting it on both sides. This is not just a Republican pushback or a Democrat pushback. Both sides are pushing back on it. And here's kind of your 2 points. If you're in a high tax state, right, like myself, California, let's say New York or New Jersey, you're getting hit twice, right? You're paying a high state and local tax, and then you're having to do it again on your Fed. So it is a double tax. How some of the politicians are framing it, you're raising the cap as a sweetener for Democrats. That's kind of what the conservative message is. And it's a way to kind of gain support because there are other elements of this bill that are being cut that I would say predominantly are supported by the left. So this is how some politicians strategically are looking as a trade-off. Now, for the argument of fairness, supporters are saying it's unfair to penalize people just because they live in high-cost areas. So that's the frame. You're framing it as avoiding double taxation. Here's why people are against it. 80% of the people that benefit from the repeal is the top 5% of earners. So critics are saying it's a giveaway to the wealthy disguised as middle-class relief. And then the other two, it reduces federal revenue so potentially by hundreds of billions. If you're not hitting a double tax, that's less revenue coming into the government. And then the last one, critics would say, is why are we cutting spending on, let's say, Medicaid, while also giving tax breaks to millionaires? The pushback now is it rewards high tax state governments. So if you have a state like California or New York that have extremely high taxes, critics are basically saying you're incentivizing bad behavior. You're allowing them to tax like crazy with no repercussions. So they like the idea that if a state is going to have high local taxes or state taxes, that in theory should put pain onto the residents. The residents would be frustrated, vote basically people out to make the state basically a lower tax state. That would be maybe the holistic approach. On this one for me, in the beginning, I stated I'm not sure yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards get rid of the cap. Look, I don't like being double taxed. I don't like paying a crap load of taxes for living in California and then having to do that again on my Fed bill. I'd rather be able to use the deduction that I'm paying for these heavy taxes and at least bring my federal tax down. But part of me also understands the holistic approach. Like if part of this bill allows politicians to tax you heavy in a certain state and the residents don't feel the implication, well, you can make the argument that some of the low tax states are now subsidizing the bad behavior of, let's say, a state like California. I think I'm kind of leaning towards that, actually. Even though that's going to cost me more money, I think I do like the pressure put on politicians that if they make policy that people don't agree with, you should have a political hit for that. I want to know your guys' opinion on that one. This is a controversial one. The SALT one is definitely controversial. It's not just Democrats who are pushing back. There are Republicans that are pushing back as well, probably because they're getting hit from some of their higher net worth constituents saying, dude, this is bad policy. You're now taking money out of my pocket. So I would say I'm trending towards don't increase the cap, but I understand both arguments. I know that's probably not the position you want to hear from me, but I think that is what it is. Now, another thing coming into this bill is, every influencer loves this one. Is it the Humvee credit or Section 179? And this is when you see all of the influencers tell you that you can buy a car that's 6,000 pounds for your business, depreciate the whole thing year one, and basically not pay taxes on it. Or how it would actually work, because I had a Tesla and I bought my Tesla for business purposes to participate in Section 179. If you bought a Tesla for $100,000, what a lot of people will do is they'll buy that car at the end of the year. So let's call it December 30th or even the 31st. Use it entirely for business that day. So 100% use of that car is for your business. Do 100% bonus depreciation and deduct the whole thing for, like in this case, let's say 2025. That would come back into play. Now, I've heard Grant talk about this one, that he buys cars in cash and he likes doing Section 179 to basically get a car that's used for business and get some deduction. But I actually don't think that makes so much sense to buy a car in cash just for the deduction. I think it makes more sense when you use debt, because you can put a fraction of money down, finance the rest, but deduct the whole value. Then you're getting more than like a dollar for dollar type of deduction. You're maybe investing $40,000 in the purchase, deducting $100,000, and now for a $40,000 down, you get $100,000 of loss. I like that better. That is currently in this bill. So we will see if that one comes back. Now, this one was really interesting. And I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm sorry. But I always call him Chamath. I don't know if that's how you say it, but he's in the All In podcast. And I really like his perspective. I don't know what side of the aisle he lands in. I'd almost put him as an independent, maybe even center left. But he's a business dude, and he's incredibly bright. He's brighter than me. He had, maybe that's not saying much, but the guy is sharp, right? He had a lot of pushback on this bill that I saw. I thought it was fascinating. So some of his pushback. Number one, the bill is fiscally irresponsible and will balloon the $65 trillion projected national debt. So, adding tax incentive is not making our debt crisis better. It's actually making it worse. And he's not wrong with that. Like, he's accurate. Like, there is a concern that we are spending out of control. My pushback would be, over the last, let's call it 30 years, you could make the argument that, more of a Democratic initiative was spending. They typically spent more than Republicans, and for a long time, Republicans were viewed as the budget hawk and being more fiscally responsible. But my pushback would be that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. It seems like now Republicans and Democrats kind of spend at par. And so if that's the case, I'm not sure what you do with that. If both parties are now spending like crazy, we have a bigger problem at hand that you don't see one party really rallying behind. So yes, is this potentially catastrophic? True. What needs to be done to solve that? We're not talking about reform to something like Medicare or your, Social Securities. So if we're not going to do that, does it really matter? I'm not sure, which is a perfect, I think, segue into his next pushback, which was the Medicaid cuts and the work requirements. So he also mentioned that this bill includes $880 billion in Medicaid cuts, which contradicts the GOP leadership's public promise, which was, we're not cutting Medicare or Medicaid. This one's an interesting one. So, one of the, I would say, pushbacks is the work requirements. So, one of the stipulations in the bill right now is for able-bodied workers. If you're an able-bodied worker, you got to work. I'm not sure I'm against that one. Like, if you can work, I don't know if you should just check out and be on kind of a social security kind of safety net. I actually think I would be okay if you're an able-bodied to continue working, but the big challenge is what this really needs is major reform, which is political suicide, right? If you start talking about really pulling back some of these programs, you're never going to get elected, right? And here's kind of the dynamic that I don't have a solution for. But if you were to run, and this is your message, America is going bankrupt, which we are, and we're spending like crazy, and major reform needs to be done, and we need to figure out Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, because these are not sustainable, and if we don't do anything, this will be the end of us. You're never getting elected. You don't have public support for that. And because our system is built off of electing representatives to speak for the people, what do you do in that case when the people don't want it? I don't know. Like, one, you never get elected, or maybe you get elected, you don't tell them you're going to do this, and then go do it, and there's just a massive revolt. I'm not sure what the solution is there, but I would say oh gosh, I can already see the freaking video now if I don't get this guy's name right. Chamath? Do we know his name? No? Chamath? Dude, my bad, big dog, if I'm misstating this name. But if your pushback is you're cutting Medicaid and you can't do that, but you're also saying that we're spending out of control and we need to cut back, I don't know what you do with that. It seems like you're in an impossible position with no way of really solving the first issue. So I don't know. And then the last one that he said was this bill could politically backfire by hurting working class families and undermine the GOP's image. That one I would probably concede to him. If you're going to run on a certain platform and then do something that is against that, I don't think that's a good look. Like, I tend to believe that the best thing you should do is run on something you're going to do and do it. Kind of, do the things the people voted for. That I think is healthy. but it does mean that you might not always win. So if you're playing the game that you want to win and be in power, you see a lot of politicians just say the things you want them to say, and then they go and do things behind your back. I don't like that. I think that's why we all have a lot of distrust in politicians, because it just never feels like there's a real accountability, and it never feels like they're shooting you straight. So I would say he's right on that one. I don't think that's a good thing to do. It feels just doesn't feel authentic. Now, what should investors do with all of this? First and foremost, I don't think you should make investments based on tax incentives. Don't make them entirely based on tax incentives. The reason why, you get yourself in a position where you're not even focused on return anymore. You're just trying to avoid the tax bill. And if all you're doing is trying to avoid a tax bill, you can put yourself in a pretty dangerous spot. So this is what it would look like for real estate investors. You buy a property. You do an accelerated depreciation schedule and front load it with 100% bonus depreciation, giving you a ton of loss, right? And then you're going to use that loss to offset your gains. Well, the problem is when you sell the asset, those gains are due, unless you do a 1031 exchange. And the idea there is you just keep doing that until you die. And then you pass the asset down to your kid and you avoid the tax bill basically entirely. But I know a lot of people that start scrambling because the tax bill will come due if they don't find a property to exchange into. They don't have the liquid capital to pay the tax bill. And then they're in this like emergency run of getting a whatever asset just to avoid it. I don't think that's good investing. I think you should always invest based off a handful of factors. One, is it a good investment, right? Is it an investment that is aligned with your goals? It has the return that matches the risk profile. Invest for that first. Then look at the tax incentives that may come accordingly. So does this mean if you're a real estate investor, you should not buy real estate until this bill passes the Senate? No. I think you should be investing in real estate whenever the opportunity is right. And then if something like this passes, well, then use it. Bring that tax bill down. I think that's the best way to do it. Now, you are seeing some pushback on this bill that, one, it's not going to pass. I saw that McConnell and Graham are like a no on the bill. And because it was so razor thin getting through the House, that means this thing is basically ripe for things getting pulled out. A couple points I would make. Number one, everything getting through the House is going to be razor tight right now. The Republicans do not have a big majority. It is razor thin. So that's how things are going to go for at least the near future. That could shift, though, very soon. Second, on the Senate side, and some of these politicians coming out now talking against the bill, a lot of this is political strategy. So you kind of have to separate the political strategy versus what might happen when this thing gets to a vote. And so what a lot of politicians will do is negotiate, right? They'll go on networks. They'll talk about that they don't like the bill and they're a no. And that is going to force in this case, Republicans, to go speak to them to get them on board to vote, which means there's going to be concessions. So don't confuse political strategy and negotiating with this bill's not going to happen. Now, does that mean this bill has a probability of not going through? Of course it does. This thing might not go through. If it doesn't, what does that mean? It's not good for the stock market. Absolutely not. The reason being, the stock market has already priced this in. And so if this passes, I don't think you're going to see a major boom in the stock market. I think it's going to just remain where it is because the tax incentive was, one, baked into the market, and two, was supposed to go hand in hand with what Doge was doing. As you're doing all of these cutbacks, right, you also need to deregulate so that kind of you don't put yourself in a position where you have stagflation or the economy starts to shrink. You kind of need to balance both out. And so I think if I were to guess, this is going to pass. I would say there's a pretty high probability of that making it through. What will be pulled out? we will see. But for real estate investors, if 100% bonus depreciation comes back, this is a great day for us. If it doesn't, we can still do an accelerated depreciation schedule, still capture a lot of loss, still get cash flow. You still get a lot of benefits if it doesn't. So I will keep you all posted on how this thing progresses. We'll see what makes it in, what makes it out, and what I'm going to ask for you guys. Let me know what you thought of this. Did you like this just brief breakdown of what's happening right now, me serving it to you? Or do you like conversational based? Put it in the comments. And here's going to be my ask. Actually, I'm going to hit you with 2 asks. I'm going to be greedy today. Number 1, we have a lot of people that watch the podcast that aren't subscribed. Will you please subscribe if you find value out of this? And this sounds so stupid. Hit the like button. The like button triggers the algorithm. That means this content gets seen. My second ask is going to be, if you like real estate, you like what you're hearing about depreciation, the possibility of 100% bonus depreciation coming back. If you want information on everything we do and you want to see if you would be a good fit to become one of our investors, I'm going to have a link in the description below. Click the link, put in your information, and someone from my team will reach out to you, get information on what we're doing, and let's see if we have an opportunity to do business together. Thank you guys. Love you. I'll see you next week.